a distance, double welcome. Welcome to Bristol. We're here to talk about the NHS, a national institution, universal healthcare, free at the point of use, meaning, whatever your background, whatever your means, you have access to the care that you need. Now, among a crowd like this, we could probably come up with many different reasons why we think the NHS is important, and probably got plenty of personal stories of gratitude for the work of NHS staff. But one thing we can share is a genuine and fierce pride in its existence and a determination to see it succeed. Unfortunately, we now have a government that threatens this very existence. And it's like a panto. Despite promising to look after it, instead, they're overseeing a descent into crisis, soaring waiting lists, overextended A&Es, hospitals facing financial crisis. And to top it all off, £4.6 billion worth of Tory cuts that's created a state of emergency in social care. You'd be tempted to think it was deliberate. Well, I would. After all, just ask yourself the question, how can a public institution who's found in principle prioritizes the need of people ever be safe in the hands of people who adhere to a political doctrine that prioritizes private profit? And so when you hear and when you see like the Labour slogan and when you hear it during this general election, for the many, not the few, that's what we're talking about. Only Labour, with its new deal for the NHS, can put it back on its feet. Only Labour. That's twice now in the last few days. In this city alone, crowds have come out in support of the NHS. Let's make sure that next week we harness the same energy and determination to make sure that we get people out to vote for a Labour government that will save it. May I please introduce to you the Mayor of Bristol, Mr. Marvin Rees.
Thank you very much, Paul. And just to say, to see so many people out here today just really makes me proud of Bristol. It's a city that's taken a stand, as we always have. It's worth pointing out, obviously, I'm not Jeremy Corbyn. So Jeremy is taking part in the BBC debate tonight. That's right. Debating with opposition parties and in front of the public. So I can't help but reflect on that our Prime Minister's not taking part in these debates. I think here's the basic question. If you don't have the front or the ability to face your opposition and to engage with your public, how are you going to stand up to Brussels in these negotiations? All this bluster about defending the British interests. Now, we know this NHS debate is going to go on. Numbers are going to be thrown around all over the place. 350 million would appear, then 350 million would disappear. We know that's going to float on all over the place over the coming weeks. But we know that there's only one party you can trust to safeguard and protect the spirit of the National Health Service and everything that it stands for in this country, about making sure that whoever you are, irrespective of your background, there is a safety net, there is a basic standard of living that you can expect this country to provide from you, a basic level of service. Can I just add one other thing to that? I think there is something I want to see added to this debate around health. And I think it's a little flaw in the argument. And I come from a bit of a public health background over the last few years. And one of the fundamental truths is that bad social policy creates sickness. It creates poor physical health and it creates poor mental health. Talking about putting money into the NHS, as the government does, without taking account of bad social policy that I'm on the receiving end of, cutting the money we get in local authorities so we can't make the early interventions to make sure people are healthy, they get off to the best possible start in life, so they have the mental and the physical resilience to cope with the challenges that come. Talking about supporting the NHS without passing good social policy is mischievous, to put it mildly. Right? It's not going to help. What you're doing is you're storing up a tidal wave of demand for the health service in future years. So what you have with Labour is not only a party that's talking about protecting the National Health Service, but one that's going to focus on good social policy that will reduce the demand on the NHS in the future, because our population won't be driven to sickness by poor social conditions. My last 2 points. One is, there are lots of people here today, just a week or so to go before the election. If everyone here went out on the campaign trail with our candidates around Bristol, it'd be amazing. So turn our passion and everyone that's here, turn that into action on the streets, getting the votes out. And finally, I got a real honour, a real favourite of mine. I'm going to introduce someone who has been doing incredibly well on Radio 4, 2-0 against Jonathan Humphreys, I understand, Angela Rayner.
I'll have to go on my tippy toes. Good evening, Bristol! Can I say I'm immensely proud to address you tonight, and I'm sorry that Jeremy can't be here. But I hope on June the 9th, with your help, I will become your Secretary of State for Education. Because Bristol, the Tories are letting your children down. They're letting us all down. They've stolen money from our schools. And now they want to take the food from your children's dinner plate. And they're leaving our children, our graduates, in £45,000 of debt just for going to university. Well, Bristol, that's not my plan, and that's not the Labour plan. We're going to make sure your children and young people get the future they deserve. Bristol, there's 3 things we need in life for social mobility: health, education, and housing. This current government have failed you on all. They've snatched all opportunity away from us, and we won't take it any longer. Bristol, I'd like to talk to you for a long time, but I haven't got my factor 50 on. And the sun is out, and we're at a health thing. So I want to say just one more thing to you. On the 5th of July, 1948, there were 2 great things that were born. One was the National Health Service. And the second one, 1 minute after midnight, was the amazing Aneira Thomas, born the first baby under the National Health Service. And not only was Aneira the first baby born under the National Health Service, with education she became a midwife helping our National Health Service. And she's here tonight to tell you about what an amazing achievement it is and how we must save it. Give her a warm welcome, Bristol!
I love you all. My name is Aneira Thomas. My story is a little part of history. I was the first baby born under the National Health Service in Great Britain. As my bottom was being smacked, giving me life, the National Health Service Act was coming into fruition. Thanks to the great man and Labour Health Minister, Aneira. A visionary who I am named after. Doctors and nurses named me after the founder, as at that time, only the privileged few could afford healthcare. This was one of the greatest moments of the 20th century and of history. I often compare the famous words of the civil rights activist Martin Luther King when he said, "I have a dream." So did Aneira have a dream after watching the human suffering and social injustice in the valleys of South Wales, where miners died young and suffered breathing difficulties due to hard working conditions underground. The doctors and nurses who delivered me kept telling my mother as she was about to give birth to me around midnight on the 4th of July, 1948, as they were watching the clock strike midnight, "Hold on, Edna, hold on." She was used to hearing the words push. My brother reckoned they pushed me back in for 1 minute. She waited, and for 1 minute, and that was the birth of our wonderful and revolutionary National Health Service. When my mother used to introduce me to new people when I was little, she used to refer to me as Nai, a national health baby, alluding to Aneira at the same time. And in my child's mind, I believed he was my father. And she used to say, "No, Lloyd George knew your father." Our NHS must be preserved, protected at all costs, and not taken for granted. Britain leads the way, and we are so privileged to have access to all these services at the point of need. The government must listen to all the health professionals and the frontliners. They are critical and the crucial experts when it comes to telling us what is needed to plan for the future and make our services the best they can be. We will be hearing from some of these amazing people, frontline staff, this evening. I will be voting for the Labour Party on June the 8th. Because of all the work they are doing to save our NHS and preserving it for the future generations. As Billy Bragg says, keep the faith. I'd like now to introduce Caroline, please.
Hello. That's a hard act to follow. My name's Caroline White, and I've worked for the NHS for 37 years. I wanted to be a nurse because I wanted to do a job that had more than a financial reward. I wanted to be able to make a difference. I feel very proud and fortunate to have worked for the best health service in the world for all these years. I work in mental health, and when I entered this branch of nursing in 1981, there were financial incentives to recruit staff into what was an unpopular discipline. We had psychiatric lead, a pension scheme with enhanced contributions and early retirement. During my training in a teaching hospital, I had a salary. Student nurses form part of the workforce, earning a living while learning. Later, a recruitment and retention premium was introduced for areas where housing was expensive. I realised I was lucky to have enjoyed all these incentives because staff coming into the health service today receive none of them. Boo! Pay freezes in the public sector mean that in real terms, NHS staff have taken a cut in pay. And I have also seen an increasingly financially driven service. Wards and staff now stretched to the limit. Patients sent to beds in other parts of the country because wards are full. Patients who can't access care in the community. Jobs formerly done by qualified staff being done by unregistered staff on low pay. Frontline staff leaving the NHS because they are not listened to when they say care is compromised. And many initiatives brought in to save money end up costing more because gaps are filled by expensive agency staff. I do believe recruitment and retention of the right staff is the key to having a sustainable service. But I do love my job. And I love my job because I care. I care about my patients, and I care about the staff I work with, and I care about our NHS. Everyone will have a time when they need the NHS, for themselves or for their family. And the NHS will be there to look after you, as long as it has the staff and the resources to do it. But the NHS needs to look after its staff. And the government needs to look after the NHS. Labour made the NHS. Labour cares for the NHS. And now we need a Labour government to save our precious NHS. Thank you. And now, I'd like to welcome Lauren to the stage.
Good evening, all here in Bristol, and thank you very much for coming and being such an incredible crowd tonight. I feel really privileged to be here alongside some amazing people. My name is Lauren Gavahan, and I work as a doctor in your NHS. Our NHS is the envy of the world, and countries have for years looked on our NHS as a model to aspire to. I want to say a few things on why I think this election, as a woman so articulately said on Victoria Derbyshire on Monday, is about life and death. I work in mental health, and this is an area, as I'm sure you all know, which is often neglected and sidelined. We are witnessing huge changes in our NHS, which means that increasingly services are cut and understaffed. Right now, there are 24,000 nursing vacancies in the NHS, And since 2010, the number of mental health nurses has fallen by over 6,000. In these last 6 years, 15,000 hospital beds have been cut, the equivalent of about 24 hospitals. And though care in the community sounds like a great thing, if there aren't services set up properly in the community, it means, as you will often know, people are out there on their own. I see the effects of this, and I have done for many years. I have held the hand of the mother in A&E whose acutely psychotic and distressed daughter has had to be shipped halfway across the country away from her mum, her family, her friends, her community, just to get a bed. As a doctor, I've had to turn people away in their darkest moments because there are simply no beds across the entire country, not one. I have witnessed the devastating aftermath of these cuts to our National Health Service. I shall not detail them in here tonight, though the images of those people, mothers, brothers, sons, shall remain with me, forever etched in my mind. We have a great opportunity here. We have a chance of a lifetime, and it is crucial that we all use it so that those people, those lives, are honoured in some way. Under the Tories, we are witnessing the infant mortality rate rising for the first time in a decade in the sixth richest country in the world. Social care is in crisis. Spending on mental health fell by 600 million in the last Parliament. The Tories have no plan to tackle the financial crisis facing the NHS and social care. Their plan, in fact, is to make £22 billion worth of efficiency savings, or in other words, cuts. This will make things much worse, and it will risk staff leaving the NHS and services closing. The NHS has quite literally been cut to the bone. I cannot watch this happen and stay silent, and neither should you. We must not be apathetic. We must all become politically engaged. After experiencing for myself the sustained attack on both my profession and my patients from this government in the long industrial dispute that we were involved in as doctors, I know that we can, but only together, make change. We are incredibly strong when we work together. We have the chance for change. Jeremy Corbyn is determined to look after your NHS, to safely... He has pledged and promised to safely staff it, to fund it, to stop the privatisation that is happening at a rapid pace, and to ensure that your National Health Service continues to belong to you. The great Tony Benn said there are two ways in which people are controlled. First of all, frighten people, and secondly, demoralise them. Let us not be controlled. Let us think for ourselves. Let us not be fearful. Let us stand up together and say loud and clear that we no longer accept the status quo, but instead will make a choice on the 8th of June to say we shall all support the Labour manifesto, not just for ourselves and our families, but for the many. I shall be voting Labour on the 8th of June, and I hope you will too. And now I am thrilled to introduce Jonathan Ashworth, your next Health Secretary.
Thank you. I'm going to mix things up a bit by speaking from a different microphone. Well, what a great response in Bristol this evening, everybody. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here. And I stand before you as a Labour candidate, as a trade union member. You don't know which trade union. As a member of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet. and with your support as the next Secretary of State for Health in this country. And it is great to be here in this great Labour city with a great Labour mayor. Wasn't he brilliant this evening? And wasn't it a great victory last year for Marvin? And it's a great Labour city, which at the last election returned 3 fantastic Labour MPs in Karen Smith, Thangan Debonair and Kerry McCarthy. We've got to get them re-elected next week. There's one small problem. There's one little... You're ahead of me. There's one little issue. Sadly, in one part of this city, at the last election, and the one before that, you elected a Tory MP. Well, next week, let's dedicate ourselves and pledge ourselves to making Bristol a Tory-free zone. Now, we've got to talk a bit of politics tonight. But before I do that, what a fantastic lineup of speakers we have had. Aneira, I've spoken with you on platforms before. Wasn't that a wonderful speech from the first baby in the NHS? And for our NHS professionals as well on the front line. And also, what a great speech from the next Secretary of State for Education, Angela Rayner. Won't she be brilliant? Now, I know many of you came to see Jeremy tonight, and we're sorry he can't be there, but I'm sure you'll understand that he's chosen to take part in the debates. And by the way, you know, for all the cynics and all who sneered and all those who said it couldn't be done, isn't Jeremy having a great general election campaign? And what about the election campaign of Theresa May? Weak and wobbly, that's right. She's weak and wobbly. And she's not debating the public. You're more likely to see Shergar debating the public than Theresa May in this campaign. But tonight, Jeremy's going to do really well in that debate. But I think we should send him a message. Now, just bear with me, because my advisors have told me I've got to get young and trendy and down with the kids. So I've joined Snapchat. This is absolutely true. I've got about 6 followers. But one of my followers is Jeremy. So I'm going to ask you, if I can do this right, I'm going to Snapchat, and we're going to send it to Jeremy. So when I put my hand down, I want you to all shout, "Vote Labour from Bristol." You got that yet? Should we have a practice? Right, so when I hand down, "Vote Labour from Bristol." All right, I think you've all right. That's right, all right. Right. What have I started here? All right. I'm going to do it. And we want "Vote Labour from Bristol." Then you can start your Jeremy Corbyn chant as well, sir. All right? I'm glad you're here, by the way. What's your name? Give Richard a round of applause, everybody. Right. I hope this works. I've never done this before. Richard! Right. I've sent that on Snapchat. I've got no idea if it'll work, but thank you anyway. So look, we're going to talk about the NHS. And I think one of our first responsibilities this evening as we talk about the NHS is to say thank you to all the nurses, the midwives, the paramedics, we say thank you. To all the orderlies, the receptionists, the GPs, we say thank you. To all the surgeons, the junior doctors, we say thank you. For all the occupational therapists, those who work in mental health, we say thank you. To 1.3 million people working in the NHS, Bristol, the nation, says thank you. But you know something? As we've heard with our eloquent testimonies tonight, those working in the NHS are being asked to deliver more and more and less and less. They're demoralised, they're ignored, they're taken for granted by this Tory government. So the very first announcement I made in this general election campaign, as your Shadow Secretary of State for Health, was to say enough is enough, not any more. Under a Labour government, we'll get rid of the pay cap and give our staff in the NHS the fair pay rise. We'll give them the pay they deserve. We cannot have a society where nurses on the way home from work have to stop off at a food bank so they can feed their family that evening. And you know something else when it comes to the staff who work in the NHS? 50-odd thousand from the EU work in our NHS. They care for us. They care for our relatives. They bring our children into the world. They tend to us in our dying hours. They're not bargaining chips. They're people. So we will guarantee the rights of EU nationals. And let's send a message. You are welcome in this country. We want you to stay in this country. We in Labour are on your side. And let me tell you something else. We want more of our young people to go and work in the NHS. We want more of our people who perhaps have had a career and want a new career to come and work in the NHS. But you know something? People aren't going to do it if they're going to take away the bursary. People aren't going to do it if you've got to rack up lots of debts. So we're going to bring back the training bursary for nurses and midwives and all the allied professionals as well. And for young people going into higher education, wanting to go into the NHS as their eventual career destination, let's send them this message. A Labour government will get rid of tuition fees also. But look at what's happening to the NHS under these Tories. 4 million now. 4 million on the waiting list. 26,000 people waiting beyond 2 months for cancer treatment. You know, since Theresa May became Prime Minister, do you know how many people have waited on a trolley? Not even before they get to a bed. Have waited on a trolley. Do you know how many? 400,000 people. Since she became Prime Minister, waited on a trolley in an NHS. You'll have seen what happened this winter. People being treated in corridors. They've even put buzzers in the corridors now. We have ambulances backed up. Hospital after hospital saying, sorry, we can't take any more people, we're overflowing. Well, I tell you what. The Red Cross, they called it a humanitarian crisis. Robert Francis, he called it an existential crisis. The head of the Care Quality Commission said it was like being on a burning bridge. Well, let's call it what it is. It's a Tory manufactured crisis in our NHS, and Labour's going to put it right. Because under these Tories, the NHS is going through the biggest financial squeeze in its history. We're seeing cuts every day to provision. And what is the answer of the Conservatives? Rather than investing in the NHS, rather than giving it the funding it needs, they would rather cut taxes for the very rich or build new grammar schools, as Angela has exposed. Let me tell you something. When they're giving away £1 billion in inheritance tax cuts to £1 million estates. Don't let anyone tell you you cannot afford to invest in the NHS. What is stopping these Conservatives from investing in the NHS is not the financial constraints of the economy, but the dogmatic constraints of their ideology. Which is why we have announced that a Labour government will give the NHS the funding it needs. 37 billion is going to go into the NHS. It's going to go into patient care. And 10 billion of that will be for the capital infrastructure of our NHS as well. Because we've got crumbling buildings at the moment. We've got a cybersecurity scandal because hospital trusts were not able to invest in the basic IT infrastructure. So we're going to bring 10 billion forward to invest in the infrastructure of the NHS as well. Now, when I said that a few weeks ago, then Week and Wobbly May the other week came out and said, oh, we're going to do 10 billion as well. But you know where she says she's going to get 10 billion from? It's called the Aneira report. It's basically selling off NHS assets, selling off land. That's not the way to invest in the NHS. Not by selling, not a fire sale of assets and land. We'll do proper investment in the NHS. £37 billion worth of investment. But you know something? It's got so bad for the Tories. I was reading a speech the other day by Andrew Lansley. Do you remember him? Andrew Lansley, he was complaining that there's too much austerity has gone on in the NHS. I mean, what did he expect? But I tell you something, though. You know Andrew Lansley? Do you know what he's responsible for? Do you remember that Health and Social Care Act? That Health and Social Care Act, which allows the NHS to be sold off, outsourced, privatised. Well, let me tell you something else. We're going to get rid of that Health and Social Care Act and end Tory privatisation in our NHS as well. Now, many of you have campaigned with me in the recent weeks but in a lot of places, it is about downgrading A&E departments, sometimes even closing hospitals, downgrading maternity wings, transferring staff out of the NHS and into other organisations. They're not good enough. We don't like them. We're going to have a moratorium on these SDPs, and instead, changes that go ahead, because changes do sometimes need to go ahead, we're going to involve the people in those decisions. Local people should have a say about the local delivery of healthcare in their community. And I was very struck by the speeches this evening, particularly on mental health. This is something I care passionately about. For too long, mental health provision has been neglected, ignored, undermined, and underfunded in this country. For too long, it's been swept under the carpet. Well, we're going to do something about that as well. We are genuinely going to deliver parity of esteem for mental health provision. We're going to put the money into mental health it deserves. And I'll tell you something else. In this country at the moment, in 50%, half of the local health authority areas, the CCGs as they're now called, children's and adolescent mental health budgets are being raided to fill gaps in the wider NHS. It's a disgrace. It's a scandal. We're going to give children's and adolescent mental health the funding it needs. And we'll do something else. Because children's and adolescent mental health has been cut back and underfunded, we have the absolute scandal, the tragedy in many ways, of children sometimes being sent to the other side of the country, even sent to Scotland. Children being treated on adult wards. No child in crisis should have to go through that. We're going to bring it to an end. We're going to put children's mental health and adolescent mental health as a top priority of the next Labour government. Because when you look at the whole provision of public health issues, and this is something Marvin was touched upon, there's a connection, a huge connection between child poverty and children's ill health in this country. Under the Tories, child poverty has risen to 4 million now. 4 million children. Many of them will be in this city. Tonight, probably not getting a hot meal, probably living in housing which is not up to scratch. That child growing up in poverty will blight their lives in so many ways. If the Tories get in again, the estimates are that child poverty will rise to 5 million. How can it be right that a child born today in wealthy Kensington is likely to live 10 years longer than a child born in parts of Finsbury Park in North London? How can it be right that a child born in deprived Blackburn is more likely, 7 times more likely, to suffer from tooth decay and tooth disease than a child born in Jeremy Hunt's constituency? How can it be right? How can it be right that children in the poorest parts of the world are more likely to be the children who grow up to be obese, more likely to be the children to have dental health problems, more likely to be the children to develop mental health issues as well? We've got to do something about it. Child poverty, child ill health, it demeans this nation. It's a scar upon the soul of Britain. We're going to tackle child poverty, and we're going to have the healthiest children in the world. It's a big ambition, but I'm ambitious for the children of this country. So, it now falls to us, as it has fallen to us through 70 years of our history, to make the case again for a national health service, free at the point of need, irrespective of means, publicly provided, publicly funded. To make that case with passion and eloquence. We've heard about Nye Bevan. When he moved the motion to create the National Health Service in the House of Commons, he said it would lift the shadow from millions of houses. He said it was the demands of a civilized society. He was right. And he dreamt of a national health service so we could move away from the patchwork of provision where healthcare depended on the luck of where you were born or the means that you had. And because he dreamt, but he also took responsibility to bring it about. And one of my favorite poets, W.B. Yeats, said, "In dreams begins responsibility." So it's our responsibility to make the argument for the National Health Service. It's our responsibility to go out there and convince people that we have a plan for the National Health Service. And it's our responsibility to do something else as well. Because you know something, as we get closer to election day, and these polls seem to be getting better, but we don't take anything for granted, the opposition will get more vicious. They'll throw more smears at us. There'll be more misrepresentations. But we have got to fight that viciousness and those smears with hope. We've got to fight that cynicism with hard work. And we've got to go across the constituencies, either here in Bristol or wider, and tell people that it is possible in this country to build a society where no child goes hungry. That it is possible in this land to give every young person a proper education so that they can lead a meaningful life. That it is possible in this country to give every family a proper, decent home. And that it is possible in this country to provide high-quality healthcare free at the point of need, irrespective of means. That is our task. That is our responsibility. And we've heard a lot of quotations tonight from famous figures in our movement's history. And there's one that inspires me, a great socialist. He's actually a Canadian socialist, so he's not as famous over here as he is in other parts of the world, but J.S. Woodsworth. And let us tonight pledge, as he did, to united effort in establishing on earth an era of justice, truth, and love. May our faces be to the future. May our faces be to that better and brighter day. We're fighting for a better, bright and brighter day. Let's go out there and let's deliver it on June the 8th. Thank you very much.